welcome to this live draft analysis of the Golden Globes Red Carpet 2024. So I'm going to look at a few looks I found online. They're probably not what I think are my favourite looks or anything, they're just interesting from a pattern cutting perspective. I've also picked a few where I think the fabric choice might have let them down, or there are some fitting issues. So this isn't like a personal opinion of what I liked and what I didn't like. It's more actually like looking at pattern cutters, makers, designers, and thinking what works well for that person, for that occasion as well. All these sort of things, what works, what doesn't work. So while I'm trying to be sort of a little bit neutral, I would love to hear which looks you really liked, or are there any looks you think could have been better. Do let me know in the chat, or just come and say hello. And I do hope I've got some sound today, because last week it did not go that well. So if you can hear me, do give me a thumbs up as well, please. And I'm going to put a little warning at the front. I'm not going to actually mention that many designers or actresses and actors' name, because I've got enough trouble memorizing fashion designers in general, so I try not to overstretch it, but also trying to remember lots of actors. So I'm going to just concentrate on the garments, on the pattern cutting details. And of course, do feel free to put any questions in the chat for me. This is going to be around half an hour, so I'm going to see how many styles I've looked at. I've prepared along sort of themes, which are things like, there are quite a few styles which had sort of bra cup styles, and I'm going to talk a bit about what works and what doesn't work. There's quite a lot of satin this year, plain satin, which is beautiful fabric, but also quite a dramatic fabric, and it's got a mind of its own, so you have to use it really well. And another thing was there was lots of horizontal designs, which I think didn't work as well. I'm going to talk about why I think they're a bit of an issue. So I've got about 10 different styles I would like to look at, but do feel free to ask questions as I look at them as well. So let's get started. There we go. Okay, let's have a look at the first one. Oh, another thing I wanted to look at is bows as well. So I'm going to start with bows, because there were quite a few bows at the Golden Globes. And by bows, I mean styles which... oh, that's wrong. I apologize. There you go. There are quite a lot of bows which... in the bust area. I picked two, just because we haven't got much time. But there's quite a few styles. I find it quite interesting. There's sort of always certain themes. This, I believe, is Amanda Seyfried, but I'm not gonna, don't hold me to that. But what is really interesting about this is how the bow is placed in relationship to the dress. And if we have a look at the other one, which I actually, I'm going to say for the next one, this one I actually think works really well with the plain black base. It's fitted, it's simple, and when you got the contrast to it is the big sort of, I think it's actually sequins, the big sparkly bow. Sorry, I'll be there a second. The other one, I'm going to quickly sketch this out. So what, because it's always better. So this is like a classic. It's basically a fitted dress. I'm going to sketch out the fit dress first. I think that's probably, you know, you could make it as a corset dress. You could actually, you know, it could just be a jersey dress. I think it was completely straight. So you could either have boning holding everything in place, and lots of paneling, and you can do sort of quite a lot of corset construction there to do a really rigid dress. Or alternatively, you could of course do a jersey dress. It's up to you. But then what is quite interesting that you have that detail. So you have like this sort of over panel which goes on top, and then it literally has like a really oversized bow. And what they've done is quite clever. They've done it at a right angle to the, you know, to the neckline, and that way it really stands out. And it's asymmetric, but it sort of cuts it across. So it's sort of, it flows with the oval dress length. So if you put, like, for example, a different version of this dress would be like this, and then it might just have a little knot like that, and Holston, a really beautiful one which went around the neckline, but that would be more central. But if you had a really big bow right at the center, it, you know, it would just hit your face. It would make you, it sort of frame your face very unflatteringly. Like this actually works really well, everything. And also, can you see, I've drawn it straight, but it's actually slightly angled. So it's done really well how it's designed. The second bow I saw, which I actually think the dress itself is pretty, is this one. And I actually love it. Look, it's very sort of, it's very Dior, isn't it? It's also actually quite Givenchy, because what it has is a fitted bodice, but while with most styles, a fitted bodice finishes on a natural waist. Can you see this goes slightly below the natural waist? So maybe by an inch or so, which is something which Givenchy did quite a lot. For Audrey Hepburn, he did it more extreme, but that's sort of a slightly unusual bodice, but it actually works really well for her. And then it's got this really simple, slightly scabbard, not too scabbard, it might skirt like that. It's a really beautiful classic look. And then it's got a classic neckline. And this is a satin, so in this case it is actually, it has the, because it's the white, I can't actually see the exact seams, but I will have seams of a kind of boning, so that is a fully fitted dress. And I actually really love this central little bow there. Should we draw it in red as well? Which in this case it's just a separate, basically fake bow. It's ornamental. What I always find tricky with styles like that it's as completely asymmetric, and understand what they've done it so it's less, it's more organic that way, because one side is lower than the other. What I always find slightly tricky with styles like that is that it becomes sort of loop-sided. That's just, maybe it's personal preference. I would love to know what you think. I always think stuff like that, it sort of looks slight, like I always want to yank it up. I also get that if you had the same style, and you get that more in, for some reason I always think of the 80s having big symmetrical bows. If you had the same dress like that, with whatever, how much boning you have, or whatever you want to do. I'm going to actually move it closer so you can see better. If you had it like this, then it would actually be maybe a little too so stuck on. If you just had the bow and it was exactly identical, it becomes, again, I'm not a fan of that much either. I just always find it quite tricky. I love this dress. I think it's really beautiful. It looks really good from certain angles, but from this angle it always looks a bit like half your body is falling down. So I always find it quite tricky. Maybe it needs to be a bit bigger, or what I think what the black and sparkly does to it, by being at a right angle, it just takes away that, it makes it very obvious as asymmetric, rather than this here in certain angles it looks really good, in certain angles it looks not asymmetric enough. So I found that quite interesting sort of pattern cutting detail to play this. The second one I wanted to look at was this dress. Let's have a quick look at it. There we go. Is this one. I'd love to know what you all think of it, because it's such a, it's sort of, again, it's this, as the dress before, it has the sort of classic, you know, mid-century, very pretty, simple evening dress with a fitted bodice and then a very full skirt. And they've tried to make it slightly more interesting, maybe, by adding that see-through corset sort of netting detail and then the cups on top. So I'm not 100% sure I'm a fan of it, and I would love to know what you think of it. And this one as well, the way they've done it is that they've, instead of having a classic style where it just finishes here, they've got it with that strange, now I'm imposing my judgment, and they got these cups on top. This is actually what stood out to me, that I don't think there's something slightly off. So they got this sort of corset style to separate it, which looks like it's power netting with bonings. It's very light, and when they got this is a beautiful fabric, and I think it might have been Armani. There's lots of Armani on the catwalk, but it's a very delicate, airy fabric. And then they got these stuck on cups like this, and I sort of understand why they're doing it. It's supposed to look like underwear, but I think because it sort of really is, we sort of, it's completely straight. For some reason I think that really divides the cup and the dress too much, and it becomes quite, it looks like it's stuck on as an afterthought, the cups. So this is why I've put it, and I've talked about this before, how when you're using cups, they really need to be, if possible, custom made. I'm trying to just work out how they're actually constructed. It might be something like that, or it might go across, but they look a bit too far apart for her. It's just, there's something like, it's sort of widening the area of her bust. It's there's something slightly off. This is very, you would then, you might want to sort of in a way make it more shaped like that rather than stuck on. That might change the look. And again, if this angle was maybe slightly closer, that might change the look. At the moment there's something that the relationship between the fitted one, which really dissects, basically try to do this sort of contrast between the underwear, the power netting, and then this very delicate, classically sweet or pretty fabric. So I understand where they're coming from even, and getting to. But I think there's something which doesn't quite work. And also because they've made it strapless, of course, it really becomes sort of very, there's no vertical lines going across. We got the vertical lines here, but then everything else is sort of into, it just doesn't quite work. Trying to do that shock contrast thing, but it's let down by the details, because you can do it really well. The other option, of course, if, for example, you had some of the paneling, see-through, that might look different as well. So you can play around with it. And hello Pokemon Girl and hello Dorothy. And I can see, Dorothy, you said you don't care for the see-through corset thing. Yeah, I just think it's been done a lot. It's supposed to be shocking. But I think the first time somebody does it, the shock value counts enough. But then after that, you actually have to do it quite cleverly. To make it work. This one seems a bit like it doesn't quite get there. And this is of course where you can then look at the pattern cutting and things like, I love the fabric, I like the color, this doesn't quite work, how would I change? And by analyzing styles like that, you can start work out what actually works for you. And if I show you, just looking at, we're not talking about the corset right now, but if you look at the cup shape, this is a better cup shape. So this is quite interesting because again, they're both quite small-breasted women. So I think you actually have to be much more precise with your cup shapes because otherwise it looks like it's just stuck on. There's different challenges basically where you do a cup size for smaller or bigger busts. But again, if you get them wrong, they become from something which can be really interesting to something which doesn't really flatter. So in here, can you see, here the shapes are sort of set in. And then, of course, it's got this really contrast button stand see-through. But here, they're better shaped, the angle. I think the angle works well for her, like that. And again, this cup's shape, I think it's still not perfect, but I think that's very hard because it's most of these aren't custom made. They might be sort of slightly, they might be custom made in the sense that they're custom fitted, but they're probably dresses which are already finished and then they're just fitted to them. But the cup shape, for example, you wouldn't fit exactly to her bust shape. So I think that's the sort of, you can see the difference of how the cup shape, the seams, the top, how close they are together really changes how something can look. And it's sort of trying to look past the fabric, past the design choices, which are the buttons and the corset, and thinking out, if I, for example, just look at this sort of cup bra style, what works, what doesn't work. And I think we're often adding something on, whether it's straps or things like that, that allows you to have different shapes as well, because from this one it really looks like it's just sort of stuck on and doesn't quite work. So let's have a look at another style. Okay. Oh, but one thing I really noticed when I had lots of things like that is, this is a Schiaparelli, and I think they've been trying to reinvent it for quite a while, and they're finally sort of getting there and getting lots of attention. And I saw some films of her, and she can't sit down in this gown as well, which I found hilarious. She has to sort of lay down. But this is actually one which I thought was quite well done. This is it's actually quite a classic style. And I've drawn it a bit too, I've done it more like a skeleton, or I always think it's like so it's like your skeleton picked out in embroidery, I think, which is of course what Schiaparelli did as well quite a lot. And then what they've done is that sort of big gathered skirt further down. Again, it's sort of quite 80s, 90s, isn't it? That's sort of a big taffeta. And I think on here it sort of works. I don't think the skirt actually serves a purpose. And Oprah Winfrey, she actually had a purple dress which I think was actually the best version of this style, where it's just like this, and then this dress itself becomes out like that. And I think that's a really classic look, which is less of a contrast. So on here, because it's the same color and there's only one, it works really well. But there are two examples which I sort of think they didn't work, because I understand what they're trying to do. So this is Via and Westwood, and here you can see another sort of underwear style thing. But they've done the sort of thing where they try to separate it. So I'm just trying to move it slightly higher up. So can you see how I have all these layers of fabric and these sort of horizontal separations? So that seems to be a real theme, where you basically sort of split the body up. Here we've got another go across. I actually think this is done really well. I quite like the top half. What do you think? I think it is sort of doing that corset underwear style really well. Sort of outerwear, innerwear, and that works really well. It's a proper sort of corset, and it's got that shaping here. But what I think it's, well, again, what they're doing here, so they're sort of splitting up the body into different fabrics. So a bit like this style. They're splitting up on here, I think, on the Westwood. I think the top half actually works really well. But I think then below, by trying to continue that sort of outer inner garment, it, first of all, the really hard corset, really constructed corset, really fights with the lace. At the center front area, you can see it's sort of pushing it out. And that's a really hard thing, because it's a really floppy. The lace is really soft. So unless you actually mount the lace on a really, you could mount it on an organza or even something really strong. Just thinking you would use several layers, but you would have to mount it to basically make it as stiff as the rest of the fabric. Because then by contrast, you got the lace fabric here and here. Then here you get again a white fabric, the same as the corset. And again, you can see it's just it's too ungainly. It doesn't work. And by splitting it up, it sort of makes it even more obvious what works and what doesn't work. And again, I've got that the bottom half comes out, and that sort of splitting the body horizontally. They've done it quite a few times, and I'll show you one more of those. So this is another one where, again, I think the top half is actually really beautiful. The black, and it, that's actually beautifully fitted as well. And I've done the opposite corset to Westwood. But then again, I think if it was just the bottom half and it came out, it'd be quite beautiful. But again, I think it's sort of what happened quite a lot, that they're trying at the moment. It becomes too many layers. It's like there's like the focus is being split up into how many times can you sort of separate, rather than something a bit more simple like that, which I think still, I get why we're doing it, but it's sort of, again, it sort of distracts from the dress. So I think in ways that the silhouette they're aiming for is like that. But you can achieve that silhouette in lots of different ways. And I think sometimes if you split it up too often, it sort of counteracts the lovely flowing lines. Whereas the Oprah Winfrey looked really beautiful in that way. So that was a really interesting style to see, like from a pattern cutting perspective, all these how certain, of course, we always get the fashion trends and how they get picked and what translates and what works and what doesn't work. And it was a really interesting example how you then might look, oh, I really like details, like the two corsets are really beautiful. But how do I, then I don't, you have the freedom when you're making your own clothes to then decide what works, what doesn't work. For example, that dress I think would also look really beautiful if you had that the skirt higher up. It's just, it's sort of a trying, it's always sort of Schiaparelli, optical illusion. It's also what very much coming down from Balenciaga, it's sort of volume starting somewhere where you don't expect it to start, or clothes worn like the half off, half on, all this sort of stuff, where you're playing with what is expected. But I always think that sometimes what is expected actually works best, or maybe changing a little bit, like distorting certain expectations. But you always have to then say, you know, if you add too many details, it can become a little bit too busy and confusing. So that was quite... What did you think of a trend of having horizontal lines? The next one, I'm going to have a look at fabric. Let's have a look. Oh, this is one I really liked for its simplicity. I think it's quite a classic look, but it's been done extremely well. And, you know, people always, you know, I guess some people would say it's boring, but I think what sometimes it's hard when you have a really classic style like that, it's very easy to get it wrong. So getting it right is actually really hard. So this is a classic sweetheart neckline. It actually it's got darts going up. And it's also got a center front seam for fitting, so it's a really fitted style. But what I really love is how beautifully the fabric is treated. So you can see there's a few sort of pulls there. But in general, that's a fabric which is so this would have been probably mounted on something. I know you also have interfacing. You might have some boning. You will have some layers of canvas just to make it really strong and stand by itself, and basically not react to your body, because otherwise it shows wrinkles, it shows any pulling really badly with sort of satin. So I've done it really well. When they just contrasted it, this, what I think is, again, I think it's either circle skirt. It's really simple, but you know, it works. And what's quite interesting as well, these sort of angled straps, again, they contrast really well. They sort of, it basically goes in and then it goes out, so it really accentuates that shape. So it's just really well, a really good application of that type of fabric and style. And that sort of satin and single colors was really popular, but this was the one that stood out for me for being just very good in the execution of using it. And I think sometimes when if you have like a print or a really busy fabric, you can get away with hiding stuff. With this one, if it, for example, wasn't constructed well enough in the bodice, it would literally show all anytime she breathed, it would wrinkle, all these sort of stuff. So this one just basically, it stands by itself properly, and when you just put it on and it holds you in place. And again, the skirt is actually also pressed and steamed, so it just looks really pristine and beautiful. And hello Suzanne, lovely for you, lovely that you can join me today. I'm just looking at fabrics, and one of the fabric ones I wanted to look at was this is Susanne's Finish, I think. And she sent me a really beautiful dress, a finished actor called Alma Postivor. And this again, I think it's an even shinier satin, but this is another really good treatment. So the satin, you either have to mount it really well, construct it with great expertise. Another way of treating it is to actually go with that pure, the way satin catches the light is quite, I don't think can be beat. And if you use a dark color like this one has done, so again, you have this sort of over drape of satin, but then underneath, I'm going to lay it up. So again, you've got a constructed bodice like the lavender dress, so like this, but then rather it having a seam, it then has volume coming out. So it's the opposite. But again, it's a quite classic look, but they are sort of slightly updated by it, but they hasn't got a seam there. How it's treated, the fabric, I think there might be a pleat here even. like this, and then it's just got this really, these big, again, it's like a quite Victorian nearly. You can sort of see that, and then the back properly looks like this. It's got these layers of fabric, and then the fitted bodice, and then it goes out. Just what I imagine. I haven't seen the back, but it's a really good use of this is like the most dramatic fabric there is, that sort of satin silk with lots of shimmer. And both of these ways, one being very, may I have a look, very simplistic, and the other one being really dramatic and draping it. Both of them are a really great way of using fabric. So that's always really important when, and you can learn quite a lot of looking at styles like that, is how the fabric is used well and to its advantage, or not. Oh, and Susanna, she said, yes, there's pockets. So where she's putting her hand in, this is like a pocket as well. So I thought that's a really fantastic use of that fabric, of it, a dress which is practical and dramatic. And of course, that's the thing, like quite often if it is a dramatic style, you can have pockets in it because it isn't skin tight. So it's like always thinking like what makes it work for you. So even if you don't want to wear a beautiful, dramatic dress like that, you can have a look at, if I have a dress like that, instead of having a pockets in the side seam, it actually has a sort of pockets, I think so anyway, it's sort of set slightly forward. Only thing with fabric like that, it's quite hard to analyze and to see what's happening because it catches the light so well. But I saw these two are really good examples of how fabric is used. And whether you want to make a big evening dress or something simple, understanding how fabric works is a really good way of getting it right. I'm going to show you again the purple one, lilac one, which I really liked. And then by contrast, it was this one, which I think is still pretty good. But here you can see what happens with a fabric like that. This, I actually imagine there's a few of these very fitted styles. So there was this one, which again is it's very Audrey Hepburn, isn't it? It's Breakfast at Tiffany's. A little bit just in a rose pink. So this is a really, again, it's using some sort of satin. I think I think the red one was probably a satin, and this one and the lilac one I think might be a Duchess. Let me have a look if I got it. I think this was actually just a straight dress. Yeah, it was just a straight dress. And then it's got little darts here and darts here, like this. So really simplistic style. I actually think it looks quite beautiful, but by contrast to the lilac one, so the lilac one sits perfectly. There's like no wrinkles, no pull marks. On here, I think it's probably a slightly softer construction. So can you see we're having slight pull marks here, and then we're also having marks here. We got wrinkles here, and then we got a mark here. And what basically I think, if she was standing completely straight, it'd be a lot less noticeable. But because this dress is so skin tight, as soon as she does that the catwalk position where you put one leg in front of the other and you sort of cross them over, it's basically your hip change, your hip shape changes, and that is basically pulling at the hip, and that's actually pushing it up as well because it's just slightly too tight around here. So I think this could have done this being just a smidgens slightly wider here, and then she could have moved around without it starting to interfere. And again here it's basically, I think that her bust size is tiny bit too big again, because this is probably it's just maybe lent or bought for the catwalk. It's not custom made. So I thought that was quite interesting how you can, with fabric like that, you can really start to find out what doesn't fit and what doesn't fit. And it's really Jennifer Lopez. She had this, again, I think it's actually a beautiful dress. And I would have loved to have seen it with her standing still again, because I think she's doing it really noticeable, where she's sort of doing a position where she sort of crosses her legs over and move, you know, like her hips, which of course makes the dress look better. But at the same time, I think that's when you start getting over pulling. So I think it's always, and because this is a stretch, this looks like it's a stretch fabric rather than this fabric probably has some, maybe some interfacing with pink dress. And then of course the lilac dress has lots of interfacing and under construction. So it's sort of, we're going slowly from very constructed. So of course, first of all, we had the draped one, where the fabric is used just by adding volumes and really contrasting really well. Then we've got something where it's very well constructed, then slightly less construction. And then you can see the opposite effect there. You use a stretch fabric, which of course makes you lets you fit it really well, but then you start getting issues with sometimes it just rides up and moves. And when I was looking at somebody else for a similar style of dress where it was very fitted and it looked like a stretch component to the Met Gala, and it had exactly the same issues. And that, it doesn't even mean it's fitted that badly, it just means it's so tightly fitted that as soon as you start moving, the fabric will react to your body. And that's always where you have to think as well. When they're trying it on and she's posing, it looks probably great. But if you sit in the car and you get out and you have to walk and you can't pull the dress while you're walking or while you're posing, then, you know, knowing the fabric choices and stuff like that is really important. And you can see the same even down here, where sort of, it's just, I think it's probably slightly, it's very well fitted to look like it like that, so maybe slightly over fitted. And then of course the fabric choice has an issue, is an issue as well. But there's also stuff where you can't avoid it. You know, you always have a compromise between the fabric choices, what you're trying to achieve and what is actually possible to achieve. Because if this then was really reinforced and strong, a bit more like a corset, it would basically end up looking like this. So this is like the pink Jennifer Lopez, but this is, I think, this is literally a thigh length corset, which then doesn't let you to allow to move. So it's always a compromise between movement, fabric, comfort, style, all these sort of things. And I wanted to I actually feel a bit guilty because I'm going to finish off on a low. But this really surprised me. This was on lots of front pages of websites and stuff. And it was a loaver dress. I really like loaver. But I think this is, again, is where the fabric choice just, it's over detail. I think it has a sort of Greek influences with a tight bag. There's lots of really interesting things happening, which by themselves can be really beautiful. But can you see how we're starting to get all the, I'm not going to draw it because it's it's sort of quite a complex design, but basically the fabric just really let that style down because it could be really beautiful. But again, we got that sort of horizontal, we got the dress sort of being horizontally separated like that, and then it goes up like that, and then I really like that sort of knot detail. But it's just, there's lots of stuff going on. And then the fabric, because that fabric, this is actually quite a good photo. You can see it on a lot of photos. It just looked like it was a bed sheet. You know how when bed sheets crease, they just never look beautiful again. They just always so slightly greasy. And even if you press it, you need to basically wash it and then steam it and press it. But this just looked, I think if this was a fabric which looked crisp and beautiful, this would have looked quite beautiful. But it was quite conceptual design anyway. And then having a fabric which really misbehaves, and she's probably been sitting in the car for hours as well, and it's all getting greased up. So it was sort of you can really see when if you go into a shop and you're thinking about buying a fabric, and you're touching and it's starting to crease already, that's when you have to think, if I make a dress out of it, as soon as you sit down, it's going to crease. And of course, if you're using linen, for example, you're expecting that. But I think this was a really interesting example of right fabric for the right style, which is hardly ever talked about enough. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little analysis of different Golden Globe styles. As I said, I just chose a few styles where I could sort of, when I was looking at it, saying, oh, that's quite interesting choices, or this is a little bit wrong, how I improve, which of course is a little bit presumptuous. But of course, that is a beautiful thing. But if you're making your own clothes, you can look at all these styles out there and think, oh, that doesn't quite work at me. How would I do it for me? Why doesn't it work for that person? And if I made it for myself, how would it, first of all, look different on my body? And also, how could I change the details to make it work for me? So it's not being judgmental, it's about basically looking at stuff from your own perspective and thinking about what would work for your body, for your style, and especially the fabric, what would be functional we're trying to achieve. So silk satin's beautiful for draped red styles, or very well constructed dresses, but at the same time, if you use it wrongly, it can be a little bit of a disaster. So I always probably like most of these styles, I might not wear, but I find them really fascinating to look at from a design and pattern cutting perspective. So you might just be making simple tops or nice skirts or trousers, but you can still look at these details, fabric choices, proportions of bodies, and use that in your own pattern making and sewing. So I hope you enjoyed this live analysis. Next week I won't be doing a live analysis because I be live with Trisha in the evening. So if you're in the UK, that would be 8 p.m. UK time on the Thursday, or if you're in the US, it would be 3 p.m. in the afternoon on Eastern Standard Time. In Europe, of course, it would be 9 o'clock at night. So feel free to watch the catch up in that case. Anyway, thank you